Good morning. It's time to get in touch. In Touch is a public affairs show dedicated to improving the lives of Susquehanna Valley residents. I'm Freddi Hammer, News Director at Backyard Broadcasting.
In 2023, spongy moths defoliated 441,819 acres in Pennsylvania. And we're certainly seeing another chance for that to happen this year. However, DCNR has begun spraying forests in spongy moth suppression efforts. And today, we're talking with a forest health manager from DCNR, Rosa Yoo. Thanks for joining me today on In Touch, Rosa.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Tell me a little bit about the difference between what the DCNR is doing and what happens with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. I didn't realize that the two departments weren't doing the same thing. You guys have a different kind of arm, don't you? DCNR and the Pennsylvania Game Commission.
Yeah, we are separate agencies, but our approach to managing spongy moth is similar. So they just oversee and implement the program on their lands, and we oversee and implement the program on DCNR lands.
You're talking about the aerial spraying. Is that something that you coordinate as the manager of the forest health program, or is it a committee that you discuss, or how long has it been going on that you knew you were going to be spraying again this year?
So our division does plan and implement the aerial suppression activities, and planning for that happens. Well, the initial planning starts really in June when we do our aerial survey. So we survey through an airplane looking for any kind of damage-causing agents across the forest in the state, and spongy moth is one of the agents that we look for. So once we see defoliation by the air in June or July, that indicates to us that those are areas we should look into on the ground. So that's kind of when it all starts. But then we have to do other surveys to make sure that, to confirm that what we're seeing from the air is, in fact, spongy moth. And then we do something called egg mass surveys, and that happens around August and September. And that's to kind of predict populations. So we need to have a certain threshold of egg masses per acre, which for us, it can be between 250 to 500 egg masses per acre. And that would initiate the next steps to determining whether or not we would implement a suppression program in that area.
Once you find those eggs, you know what you got. That's sort of like what could happen. Now you got to suppress it. That's what you're saying.
Yes, it's based on the egg masses, but that all happens based on our aerial survey, where we need to kind of focus, and then the egg mass surveys will confirm or not confirm whether we need to have a program or not.
What does it look like when you're in a plane looking for spongy moth infestation? Are you looking for those webs, or do you just see that the leaves are being eaten?
So spongy moth does not create any kind of web.
Oh.
That's a different kind of caterpillar. But yes, we're looking for feeding on the leaves. So June and July would be the height of defoliation by spongy moth. A lot of times, if trees are healthy, they will actually refoliate. So we have to do our survey before that happens because we want to see the feeding that's taking place. And that's why it's kind of hard, because it could be something else that's feeding on it, or it could be a couple things happening.
Yeah.
So we have to confirm it by ground truthing.
I was going to say, what kind of crew goes out then to look for the spongy moths? You give them coordinates and then say, hey, go find this.
Yeah, we have forest health specialists and forest health foresters and forest health technicians, and they're all on staff to do the groundwork and track and record and survey, monitor. Yeah, we have crews that do that.
Is everybody kind of like me, a little bit confused about exactly what you do about spongy moths? I mean, we talk about them. We don't really know, do you? You guys are the experts.
I guess I don't know. Pennsylvania's had a spongy moth suppression program since the 1970s, so it's been around for a long time. We don't always implement a program, and surely not this large every year, but they are cyclical. And so in years when we are in outbreak stages, we have larger programs, and obviously they're more of a nuisance because they're in such high populations.
What is the extent that you've seen as far as are you in the midst of doing the analyzation and sending the crews out, or have you already done that and now you know it's time to spray?
Yeah, all the ground truthing, that happened last year.
Okay.
So the planning and everything into the suppression program happens almost a year in advance. Right now, on April 29th, I believe, we start our suppression programs.
Does anybody complain about the substances that are going down on the trees? Do you find that that's any kind of nuisance or problem for people, or do you find that that's a very easy insecticide to use that's friendly to people and animals?
Yeah, the products we use are very safe for people and animals. It's very specific to lepidopteran caterpillars, which are caterpillars that will eventually, turn into a butterfly or moth. And it has to be consumed by the caterpillar at a certain life stage. So it's very specific, the products that we use. So the non-target impacts are very minimal. I think we get more complaints about people wanting us to spray more than we actually do than anything else.
I've seen a lot of people like showing their children's skin with the welts on it from these caterpillars that once you touch their venom or whatever's coming out of their fur or spikes or whatever, that's what's causing it. It's not a bite, right?
Correct. Yeah. The caterpillars don't have the mouth parts that can bite or sting. It is the hairs on their body that some people are sensitive to. And so if people find that they are sensitive to that, then they should surely wear like long sleeves and cover their skin. But it's been kind of recent that I've heard more and more people being sensitive. I wouldn't say it's typical, but it is happening where people are becoming more sensitive for whatever reason.
After you do the analyzation, do you get involved in the crew work or any part of the spraying or the logistics of the choices that you make of where it goes? Or is your job done as the manager, or you just oversee stuff?
So yeah, my job, it is to oversee. I do have a section chief that is in charge of kind of operations. And so we do work closely together if issues arise. But for the most part, they've been implementing this program for decades. And so they know what they're doing. It's just when something new or different happens, maybe then I can step in. But I am involved in the program. So I'm here every day just to make sure that, you know, if there's any issues or anything, that I'm available for the staff and the contractor.
What can people do, people like me in the neighborhood, seeing these worms, seeing the caterpillars, what can we do to help your efforts? Is there something like, can we rid our property of the worms? Can we find the egg masses ourselves, or are we kind of just letting you know by informing you of what we got?
So definitely killing the caterpillars is never a bad idea.
Okay.
Making sure that they are the spongy moths. And right now, scrape or crush any of the egg masses. So those efforts should happen from the fall through the winter. But once they all hatch, there's no more eggs in there. And then, yeah, it is just to have property owners, if they can, suppress their populations. I mean, altogether, if we all work together, then overall the populations will decline.
Is this as large as any other kind of suppression of pests? What other things are you dealing with, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it all depends on the year. So spongy moth is cyclical. And right now, because we're in an outbreak, it does consume a lot of our time. But there are several other forest health pests that we deal with and address and monitor. And we just have to find time to kind of work it all through. This time of the year, May, when we're implementing the suppression program, is the most time that we have to dedicate to spongy moth specifically. So we really can't work on other projects when we're doing this program. But once we're done, then we kind of move on to the next thing. We also have technicians that help us kind of fill in the gaps while the majority of the staff is out on the suppression program.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we have hemlock woolly adelgid, beech leaf disease, oak decline, others, emerald ash borer.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of other pests, and then so many that we don't know of yet that can pop up at any time.
Do you work with any other research groups that when you find something that may not have been addressed before, then you know, oh, let's get somebody to take a look at this?
Yes, absolutely. We work very closely with the U.S. Forest Service as well as Penn State, and there might be other universities or other states that might have experience with the new pest. And so we do a lot of collaboration with other agencies and other groups just so we don't reinvent the wheel.
Sure. When the weather happens, like we have rainy conditions, does that hinder your spraying operations?
Yes, it does, because, well, we can't apply the product while it's raining or if rain is predicted soon after.
Okay.
Or even if the foliage is too wet, because it won't stick appropriately to the leaves. So we are limited by rain and wind, humidity, and temperature. We have to make sure that all those conditions are suitable so that our applications are the most effective. I will say, though, that rain is good for us because it will encourage natural biological control, which is a fungus, entomophaga, and you really need a cool, wet spring for those entomophaga spores to become active and be effective at controlling the spongy moth populations.
We're doing that right now with the cold conditions.
Let's hope so. I think it has to continue a little bit longer. We won't know till later in the season if the fungus is active. It usually affects the later instar caterpillar, so we wouldn't necessarily see it right now.
Rosa Yoo is the Forest Health Manager for DCNR, working now to eliminate the spongy moth population around here. I'm thinking, what made you love this job? What makes you do this job? What did you start as? What was your college career about?
Yeah, so my college focus was forestry and forest health.
Okay.
So it has been something that I've been interested my entire career. So it's not a far stretch for me to be here and to be working for DCNR as their forest health manager.
Do other states deal with this as much as we do? Or is this just a regional thing for our East Coast, or is this across the board?
So it does primarily affect the Mid-Atlantic states and somewhat of the northeastern states, but Pennsylvania is certainly one of the most active states in spongy moth suppression, and part of it has to do with our forest composition.
Oh.
In Pennsylvania, we have a large landscape of contiguous forests that are dominated by oak trees, so that's what makes our forest resource really susceptible to spongy moth damage, and not all states are structured that way, but there are other states that do also implement a spongy moth suppression program.
Have you been a leader in that situation? Like people call you and say, how did you handle this? And then you share your information?
We do often share our program information with other states, especially with some states where it might be new. There is a program called Slow the Spread for spongy moth.
Uh-huh.
So there are still several states that are in the Slow the Spread area, and that's just where they have lower populations. But sometimes they may have to implement a certain type of suppression program, and we're always available and willing to assist or provide how we implement our program to help other states. Pennsylvania is very active in attending multi-state meetings, regional meetings, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do provide updates on our programs, how we've made improvements or changes. And so we're always sharing the information that we have with other states and agencies.
You kind of have to keep fighting. You were talking about if it's successful, the trees can reforest and have their leaves again. That's good. What's this plan B in case that goes too late or they do deforest the oaks? How do you handle it then? What happens?
Well, so unfortunately that does happen because there's no way that we can suppress all the acreage that needs to be suppressed.
Okay.
We are really limited with our resources. So this year, about 400,000 acres were defoliated by spongy moth. Last year, it was over 800,000 acres. And we just can't get to all the places that are affected by spongy moth. So there are going to be places that we miss. We have a very good mechanism to prioritize areas that we implement our program so that we can really try to have the greatest benefit to the areas that we're including. So it does happen, unfortunately, because we just can't do everything. And in those cases, it really comes down to proper forest management so that you can still have that next generation of trees to be healthy and you do still maintain that forest component.
It makes me think about the squirrels. Like if the oaks are affected, then the acorns aren't coming out. So that might affect the other animals, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it's really critical that we continue these suppression efforts to try to protect as many acres as we can.
Rosa Yoo, Forest Health Manager for DCNR, really trying to keep forests healthy, doing all the work that you can. Do you feel like it's not a 9-to-5 job? Do you worry about the forests at home?
Yes, of course.
I'm thinking you would. People who love the forest want them to stick around. We want to support you, Rose. I hope that we can. And as the public, I'm hoping that we can, write an email. What can we do for you as the public to help more?
Well, I think suppression activities on private lands, that holds a large component. Over 70% of Pennsylvania is privately owned. Okay. Woodlands are privately owned.
Uh-huh.
And so really we rely on those private landowners to implement or, to try to work together with each other to suppress as best they can. I mean, I think, like I said earlier, Pennsylvania has a lot of forested areas in the state, and DCNR, only has jurisdiction over a fraction of that. And so we really need everyone to chip in the best they can. And our website has several resources on there to help private landowners and woodland owners on how to implement a suppression program. So hopefully they can utilize those resources to help protect their trees too.
What are we going to see in the sky when the spraying is happening? What kind of vehicles are flying around administering the insecticides?
Yeah, so we use fixed-wing aircraft. The majority of them are yellow and blue. We do have some that are different colors, but most of them are yellow and blue. And then we have rotary aircraft, which are primarily like a dark gray, black. So we'll have those two types of aircraft in operation.
We'll give you a big salute from the ground when we see you, because we just want to make sure that they continue to grow and maintain a great atmosphere for the PA wilds. We want to make sure that they stick around and help the animals and keep the trees up, for sure.
Absolutely.
I'm so happy to be able to speak with you and get a little bit more of an understanding about spongy moth suppression here in Pennsylvania with DCNR. Rosa Yoo, the Forest Health Manager for DCNR. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us that I may have missed, or that something that you'd like to tell specifically so that we can help you the most?
Well, I think that the planning for spongy moth suppression has to happen well before May. And so, unfortunately, the timing of this might be a little late for this year.
Okay.
But definitely for next year, the planning, if anybody wants to or is interested in implementing a suppression program, a lot of that work happens the year prior, or maybe even like January, February, before the caterpillars even hatch.
Okay.
So it's critical that any plans to implement a suppression program is done as soon as possible. But waiting until May when the caterpillars are out and feeding, it could be challenging. Find a vendor that can help you with your efforts, as well as the development of the caterpillar. You know, as you continue to wait longer and longer, they get larger and larger, and the efficacy kind of is reduced a little bit.
Okay. As far as the administration of the insecticide is what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
When are we going to see the moths? I remember one time in Wellsboro, it was like there were moths everywhere. I couldn't believe it. Is that going to happen again this year?
Yeah, so they will mature into a moth around July.
Okay.
So, yeah, if there's high populations, you can expect to see a lot of moths again. The interesting thing is the females don't fly. They can't fly.
Oh.
It's just the males. So the males are kind of like a standard medium-sized brown moth, and they actually fly during the day, and you'll often see them like fluttering in like a zigzag pattern. They're trying to find a female.
Okay.
And the females are a little bit larger. They're white. And like I said, they can't fly, so you'll often find them on like the trunk of a tree or on the side of a building. They're just hanging on. They can crawl and walk, but they can't fly. So that does help with dispersal, like reducing the dispersals a little bit, but it's then in the caterpillar stage when they disperse. That's why people are seeing them right now, because after they hatch, they're blowing around with the wind. They're trying to find a tree and disperse. So that's what's happening.
It's really a fascinating subject. I mean, hearing you probably just so much stuff in your career that you have to deal with on a daily basis is like, wow, right at the top of this iceberg that we don't even really realize is underneath there. So thank you for all that you do, Rosa.
Oh, yes.
Tell your department as well. So I'm so happy that we can talk with you from DCNR and get details on the spongy moth suppression. And we're just going to keep our fingers crossed that you guys know what you're doing and it's going to take care of our trees.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa Yoo, Forest Manager for DCNR. You were on In Touch today. We're so grateful to have you here in Williamsport. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
In Touch is locally produced in our studios at 1685 4 Mile Drive in Williamsport. To get in touch with us regarding questions, comments, or topic ideas, call weekdays between 8 and 5, 570-323-8200. You can also write to us at 1685 4 Mile Drive, Williamsport, PA 17701. Attention Freddi Hammer. Or email me at fhammer@backyardbroadcasting.com. For archived programs of our In Touch series, you can download and subscribe to our new Backyard Podcasting feature through a link on any Backyard Broadcasting website or obtained where podcasts are available. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, Backyard Broadcasting. The programming discussed here on In Touch does not necessarily reflect the feelings or opinions of the management or staff. Thanks for listening to In Touch, a production of Backyard Broadcasting.